Hi there, Deborah Carter here from Preparation Tech, where we explore study, training, and career paths which involve tech while celebrating a diverse and inclusive group of role models. In this interview, I talk with a professional photographer about his job, the tech he uses, and his quest to celebrate mixed-race Japanese people. Hope you like the interview. If you want to see more of these kinds of interviews, follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
My name is Tetsuro Miyazaki, as you said. I'm a photographer. I had a Japanese father, passed away, a Belgian mom, and I live in the Netherlands. I'm a photographer. I'm mostly an event photographer and a portrait photographer, but events have been canceled for over a year now. So I'm basically just a photographer, portraits, and I do a lot of street photography as well. Well, I'm not sure if it's a dream job. It's a job, and I happen to like it a lot. But it started as a hobby. So I'm not a photographer. I didn't study photography. I studied something else. I studied Japanese, and then I worked for a Japanese company, and I had interest in photography for a while, or as probably always. And I managed to make a living out of photography along the way. So it wasn't my first choice. And it was something that I desperately wanted to try and see if I could succeed and make a living and pay rent or mortgage and a beer occasionally by making photos. And I'm happy to say that that worked. So I'm very, very pleased with the job I have. It's still work. So I think it's exaggerated to say that it's a dream job because you still have to deal with clients and whatnot.
Well, maybe let's next go to your Hafu project, because I think that is, for me, what just really put you on my radar screen. That, your project of storytelling, showing the photos of mixed race Japanese people, really educated me about the diversity in Japan, which I had no clue about. So tell us a bit about that.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that project because obviously it's a very dear project to me. I've been working on it for about 3 to 4 years, and it's an ongoing project in which I portray and interview people who are just like me, who have one Japanese parent and one non-Japanese parent. That's the word hafu. It originally derives from the English half this and half that. So one part being Japanese and the other being well, another nationality. And in case of Japanese, I always identified as hafu myself. So when I was getting children, I was wondering if being mixed Japanese, how it would influence who I was and how that would reflect on my children and how I would tell them about my background. So since I'm a photographer, I use being a photographer as an alibi to meet up with people and to interview them and to ask all the questions I wanted. Because what I learned is that if you're honest and if you're open and if you're truly interested, anything goes. You can ask anything you want. But it has to come out of genuine interest. And you have to open up and you have to be vulnerable when you have these conversations. And you never know when you're going to have a difficult question back. So what I was doing was meeting mixed Japanese people. And I set this goal, which was I wanted to meet 192 combinations of mixed Japanese people because there are 193 countries recognized by the United Nations, which makes 92 possible combinations with Japanese. And then I found out there's more countries that are not recognized, but still are countries, but that's details. But I had this very ambitious goal, and obviously it was like this Pokemon Go kind of gamification where I wanted to catch them all. And, I had a map, and then I was coloring the maps. They were originally red because I didn't cover them yet. And then they become green when I cover the country. So I had a map of the world that slowly turned from red to green, showing the countries I had covered, and then also showing the countries that I hadn't covered yet, which made it easy for people to help me and look for more people to interview and photograph. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to find out which part of me is Japanese and which part of me is Belgian. And when I talk about parts, I don't mean limbs or organs, obviously, but I wanted, which part of my personality is Japanese, and can you allocate certain characteristics to a nationality? That's what people do all the time, because people tell me, "Oh, you're so humble. Must be your Japanese side." Or "You're so direct. That must be because you've been living in the Netherlands for so long." So you get these people allocate these characteristics to a country. And I wanted to see which part of me is, like I said, Japanese, which part is Belgian, but what part is just me? Because I could possibly be compulsive. But people say, "Oh, that must be Japanese. You're so tidy," which I'm not, by the way. But just an example. So I wanted to see how that worked for me, and I wanted to compare how our identity. So we have something in common, which is we all have one Japanese parent. That's what we all have in common. But apart from that, we're totally different people. Um, but I wanted to see what we have in common, what separates us, and what influences the way we look at ourselves. That's, I think, the main goal of this project that I had. For people who haven't seen the project, it's called Hafu to Hafu, and so I have the book here, but it's basically mostly a website and an Instagram thing, because it lives online. I want it to be accessible for everyone, everywhere in the world. So I made a book, but it's also available for download, which is free, because I want everyone, and especially children, and their parents, to grow up knowing that they're not alone. So one of the things that I found out is, yes, we are unique, but we're not alone. There's more people like us, with the same questions, with the same uncertainties, all over the world, and we all have something in common. And what I did is I took a picture at the end of a 1 hour interview, in which, as I said before, we talk about anything we want. And at the end of this interview, we try to summarize or to boil down the conversation into a single question. So the question is mostly related to the topic that we talked about during this 1 hour interview. And that's the question that remains in the book and that remains in online, is a question to the viewer, which, so the photo and pictures that you find interesting says more about you than about the person in the project. I try to use my photography mostly as a mirror. So you're looking at someone, you're not looking at yourself, but they are looking directly at you and they're asking you this question.
Let's now back up and go to technology. What kind of
Right.
tech do you use for your work? Because you are obviously out on the street or in front of people. What tech are you using?
So my primary gear, the one thing I have with me is a camera. I have different cameras for different purposes, but the most important camera or the best camera that I can imagine is just the camera that I have with me. So if that's the one on my phone, because that's the one that's in my pocket, then that's the best camera I have at that moment. So sometimes I shoot my children. I don't literally shoot them, although sometimes, I wish I could. But no, they're adorable. But I have different cameras for different purposes. And I have, for example, a very small camera, which is a very good but very small, kind of pocketable camera. And I have larger cameras. I shoot mostly with Fujifilm. There are mirrorless cameras. I don't know how far you want to get into detail, but I choose these cameras. I choose this camera because, for example, it has these, I don't know if you can see it,
Oh
but it
yeah.
has these knobs on top, and you can you can turn the dials like a real vintage analog film camera. So I love the feel of that, and um, yeah, so that's my primary camera for shooting shoots, for shooting street photography, and then I have a slightly larger one for commercial work, and so on. So I've been using a MacBook for a long time. When anybody comes in with a Windows laptop, I'm like, ooh, I have no idea what to do with it, and then the other way around. And my most used software is all Adobe. I use Photoshop. I use Lightroom, which I use as a catalog to order. It's like a library where I put all my pictures in. I import them there. I do some basic editing. I pick the pictures I want. Then I export them to Photoshop, and I do the final editing in Photoshop. Everybody has a camera with them all the time. I don't know numbers, but if you look for the amount of photos that is being made and uploaded every minute or every second, it's incredible. So it's done a lot of good for photography, for the number of people who take pictures, and it forces the people who want to be on top, they need to be even better. So it pushes the skills. Obviously, you can become a professional photographer. That's the that's one obvious choice or an obvious career path that you can follow. I didn't become a photographer, as I said. I didn't study photography, so I became a photography along the way. I became a photographer along the way, a professional photographer along the way. And the same, everybody needs some photography skills these days. If you post things anywhere, better photos do a better job. If you have a website, you post pictures, you can make your own pictures, but they need, the better they are, the likelier people will be willing to watch what you're making, because we are so focused on the visual aspect of things. I have the same, you look at a blog, if the picture is nice, I tend to read it. If the picture is not so nice, you need to have a really good caption to catch my attention. Mm-hmm. So it's a skill that really everybody benefits from. Go out and shoot. Go out and shoot photos all day, every day. Doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't matter which camera you have with you. As long as you have a camera, just make photos. And this may be weird, but step back from the instant gratification. Step back from posting your photos online every moment of the day and waiting for people to like it or not. So I would suggest to have a combination of online and offline photography. Make your photos and stop worrying about what people might think of it. Stop worrying about Instagram's algorithm, which is messed up, because they force you to shoot a certain type of photos because that will generate likes. And that limits the way you look at the world and the way that you can evolve as a photographer. So if there's any advice that I can give about tech, it's to use it to your advantage and not let it guide you or direct you into what you have to be or become or shoot or make.